Welcome to Beyond Coding, a dive into the world of successful people in IT. From your sponsors, Zebia, creating digital leaders. Here's your host, Patrick Akil.
Hey, Evelyn.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going great, thanks. How
Awesome.
are you?
I'm good too, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. Really,
no
really
problem.
looking forward to this.
Yeah, cool. So I was listening to a conference that you did. You said it was DDD Europe on the way here, actually. And in that, you didn't label yourself as a developer or anything, but rather a social scientist.
Correct.
And to me, initially, that sounds kind of contradicting. Social science, social scientist within the IT world. But as the talk went on, it started to make a little bit more sense. How did that happen? How did you join the IT world from a social science background?
Yeah, I can imagine that it kind of sounds weird in the beginning. So in that talk, I even put a disclaimer in, like in the beginning, like I'm not the world's greatest developer. Please don't expect anything from me in that sense. So I'm a social scientist. So I studied cognitive biases, organizational psychology, information sciences as well.
Yeah.
And then basically when I did my master's, there was this professor at my university which really inspired me. And he was working in IT as well, thinking about decision making, how people were behaving in organizations. And I was like, I want to do something with that. So he had some connections at a very technical company.
Yeah.
And I did my master research there on social success factors in agile software development.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what got the ball rolling for me. I mean, I found out there that transformational leadership and value congruence, which means basically that you are on the same page, that you have the shared sense of reality. And those were the biggest predictors for success in agile software development projects. And I was like, this is something, we should do something with this. So it had nothing to do with the technical side of stuff. Well, obviously it does have to do something with that. But I got really convinced that it's not just about the technical problems. You really have to balance the social, cognitive and technical aspects. So yeah, that's what the social technical systems are about. Yeah. And then I was like, so the IT world needs to know this. And it got a personal quest of mine. Like I was like, I need to tell the world what I know and how it's affecting everything. And so that's how it started. And then awesome. And then the ball was rolling.
That's awesome. So when you say kind of a shared sense of value, what does that mean?
Basically, it means like we sometimes say like you have to be aligned, right? Everyone needs to be on the same page about where we're going, what we're doing, why we're doing stuff, how we should work together. I mean, if you have really scattered principles on anything, so you have personal values and work values, and it's especially about the work values, like how are we tackling problems, how are we working together, how are we solving problems in general, and it's really important that you are on the same page there. So that's the value congruence part, and then the shared sense of reality. I'm a huge believer in the fact that everyone needs to know what's going on. So, for example, the whole visual and collaborative modeling part, just getting business and IT. I really hate those labels, but getting business and IT in the same room, and just start mapping stuff. Like, what is it that we're doing? And that will get you the conversations that you really need to have in order to be on that same page, to have that shared sense of reality, because business will learn things about IT of which they were thinking, I had no clue that this was the case, and the other way around, obviously. So it's really about those conversations. It's not even really about the mapping or the coding or whatever. It's really about defining those problems and solving them.
Yeah. Why do you think that doesn't naturally happen, that business and IT, let's just label them as they are, have that conversation by themselves? Because I always notice that people need to put them into the same room before it happens.
Yeah, it is. That's still the case, unfortunately. So I'm kind of hoping that it will decrease in that sense. But I'm seeing that as well in the companies that I'm in at this point. And I really do think that has everything to do with not being on the same page about where you're going as a whole. I mean, you have these two parts, business and IT, and it feels like they are doing separate things because, well, they are in essence. If you are really looking at it from a black and white perspective, you could say that, but at the end they're working towards the same goal. But if this same goal is not known by everyone, or it's not being discussed and it's not being shared, I mean, sometimes what you see happening is that leadership thinks of something, they're dictating stuff, and then it's like, go. But if you don't negotiate like the boundaries, what does it mean? What does it mean in terms of responsibilities, in autonomy? Then it's not going to happen, because IT is just going to think, well, we're going to build our own shared sense of reality here, and we're going to build the best products that we can. But it's not necessarily aligned with what the company goals are. And I do think that what you see happening a lot still is just the C-suite, the C-level board member part of the organization, just going into a room, thinking about everything, coming out, and then it's like, go do something with it.
Yeah, it's a really weird hierarchy that sometimes you'll find within a company. And it creates really weird social structures, I can imagine, because when you put those people in the same room and you have that hierarchy, I think the communication falls for it, basically falls flat. In most cases. That's
a very interesting social dynamic indeed, that I've seen happening as well in a lot of organizations. I mean, there is this ranking thing, right? The hierarchy that you're mentioning, it's really present. And especially when the big bosses come in, telling us what to do or telling us what the plans are, and then leave it with that. It can be very hard at first to have that conversation. I mean, putting people in a room, that's one thing, right? But you really have to facilitate that conversation. Because very, very often what happens is when you put those people in a room, you see that some people are talking a lot and some people are just like, okay, I'm gonna back out and not say a lot because, well, maybe I'm saying the wrong stuff or someone will think I'm an idiot. That's cognitive bias happening there, by the way. But you see that happening, and then I really think you need a good facilitator that is able to make sure that everything that needs to be said is indeed being said. And that's why facilitators are really crucial, because they can just state things like, share observations like, hey, I'm noticing that some people are talking a lot and others are not really talking or sharing their opinion. So anyone wants to react to that. So you can really, as a facilitator, you can state those things, make those observations explicit, and then facilitate that conversation, because naturally the people higher in ranking will talk more, and will talk more in a way like, this is the truth, instead of, I'm thinking this, what do you think?
I'm assuming it's really good that a facilitator doesn't have any stake in the game then as well.
Absolutely.
Because then they can just finger point and be like, call people out, let's just say. And not necessarily have any consequences. No,
exactly. Because I, as a facilitator, I don't really care if you're the CEO or if you are a developer or if you are a marketing manager or whatever. I don't really care because I don't have a stake in it. My stake is that I need to make sure that everyone feels safe enough to tell stuff and to share your opinion, because if you want to get to that shared sense of reality, if you want to get to that value congruence, it's kind of a condition that everyone says what they're thinking, because you want to get all the knowledge and all the perspectives and all the wisdom. You want to get that on the table. And if not, then that shared sense of reality is far, far away. And it's not going to help you.
So then, as a facilitator, what do you usually look at when you put those people in the same room? It
changed after COVID, obviously, because I'm pretty much trained to also look at the non-verbal communication. So what people are doing, where they're looking at, how they're sitting, what their posture is, what they're doing with their hands, what their eyes are doing. All these who's standing next to who. That's also a very, very interesting thing. So when you just started training, it's a lot to observe. So I take lots of notes in all these meetings. But especially in the beginning, when this group starts, you see a lot happening, because you see who's forming a group with whom, who's talking to whom, who's like keeping distance from other people. So that tells you a lot at the beginning of a session. And that's easy when you're in the same room, right? But virtually that's harder to do. But you look at different things virtually. But when you're in the same room, like that's all before the session starts, and then when the session starts, you're also noticing like how people are saying stuff, what the intonation is there, how they are presenting themselves. If people get more comfortable along the way, there's really a lot that you can just observe, apart from everything that's being said about what we're actually there to discuss. I mean, we can discuss stuff about the architecture or the domains or whatever. But all the other stuff is also telling me a lot as a facilitator.
Yeah, man, that sounds like so much. Is that something you actively look at then? Or is it something you passively observe as well?
Well, both. But what I do with it, I mean, if you observe a lot, and what you will see happening is patterns. I mean, if you observe something like 3 times, then for me it's a pattern. And after a while, I'm doing this something called a weather report. Like I'm just stating facts, stating observations. Like, this is not a judgment or whatever, but this is just what I saw happening is that some people are talking a lot. What I saw happening is that some people are not putting any stickies on the wall. Just very general, never pointing to someone, but just in general, these are the facts, these are the things that I'm seeing, and then stay quiet.
Okay.
And that's the hardest thing to do, just stay quiet, because that's awkward. I mean, we don't like that. We don't feel comfortable in silence usually. But I'm just stating it and then waiting for other people to react to it. And usually that happens because they are like, yeah, I recognize that. And then the conversation gets going. And those are really good pointers for me to get that social interaction going. I mean, we can, we need to map out the stuff that we're there to map out. So it's domains, because it's usually the collaborative modeling is usually done in domain-driven design. So we need to get that. Well, that's something that we really need to do at the end. But my main focus is making sure that, apart from that outcome, we as a team need to do this. So how are we going to make sure that we can do that?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a big believer in making people realize it themselves rather than telling them what to do. And we're here in this room to do this and this and this. So let's do it.
But it can be awkward.
Oh, I mean, for sure.
And the first times that I really had to call out like a person with a very high rank, because he was just like acting like I cannot swear in this podcast, but you're
like
you
a
know
boss
what
man.
you know what I'm getting at. He was really the tall white guy in that, like I'm here to tell everyone what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it was a pattern, and you just noticed that everyone got scared to speak up, because every time that someone did speak up, they were just like
put down.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, go back in your room. So I was like, I have to call this out, because this is a really, really big problem.
Yeah.
But I was pretty nervous, I can tell you that.
You're like,
Yeah. So but I did it in the same way, just stating neutral, objective facts and observations.
Yeah.
And it eventually, we didn't get to model anything in that session, because we were just completely focused on, so what's happening here socially, and we need to fix that first. So it works, but it can be pretty scary.
What did that do to the room in that particular example? At
first, you could really feel everyone got really uncomfortable, looking at me like,
what did you do?
Did you really just do that? Did you really just, okay. We never did that. On the other hand, so people were waiting for this person to react.
Yeah.
Obviously, and that person did, because, that was in his nature at that point. So he reacted pretty defensive. And then I just asked to the group, so is there anyone recognizing what I just said?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really get personal, because you could just raise your hand or say, yes, I recognize it. And then slowly you can get into that conversation. So, you recognize it. Can you share how does that make you feel? Or is it holding you back from telling anything else, or sharing your perspectives or whatever? And asking that person, in this case, the high-ranked person, like, were you aware of this?
Yeah.
It's mainly about asking questions, basically. I try to, that's one of my own heuristics in any session. Try to ask more questions than stating stuff. And I think that's a really helpful heuristic for everyone, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. When you say heuristic, what do you mean by that?
Well, a heuristic for me is kind of a rule of thumb, or just for me, it's just an anchor for myself. I have a few heuristics or rules for myself, or it's kind of a guidance for me. Like if I'm in a meeting or in life, maybe we can get a little bit of more philosophical here. There are just some rules that I try to live by, of which I think that are really really helpful. And like one of them is asking more questions than stating things. So always try to see the bigger picture there. Like, and it's hard because as a human being, you're always judgmental. But I try to postpone that in a way. I mean, in that particular session, obviously I had an opinion, but it's up to me then as a facilitator to not share that opinion and postpone the judgment and just get everything on the table.
Okay, cool. It was not the time and place for that opinion, probably.
No, absolutely not. No, and apart from that, it's my personal opinion.
Exactly.
So it doesn't really matter in that situation.
Yeah, but the thing you say about heuristics, I mean, I think I align with the one you said in asking more questions and judging later, or trying not to judge and be objective.
Yeah.
But I don't recognize in myself that it is a heuristic of mine or kind of a rule I live by. Yeah. I think that's what most people have, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's and I think that has to do with me studying cognitive biases.
That helps.
Yeah, because I know what they can do to a person. So basically, because of that, because I know that, I'm trying to counter them, especially in the sessions that I'm facilitating or that I'm leading. I know what these cognitive biases can do. So I'm like, okay, in order to not be a victim of them and to counter them when necessary, being very aware of them, I need to do this, and this. So for example, also I'm always very conscious about the anchors that I can drop. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the anchoring bias, but that's we are very responsive to the first piece of information we're getting. Okay. So for example, if we're doing a planning meeting and I'm asking, or the Scrum Master is asking, so how much time will this take us? And someone says 2 weeks. Then that's the first piece of information that the rest of the group gets as well. Okay. So maybe the rest of the group was thinking, well, this is going to take 2 months, but that person said 2 weeks, so I'm going to say 4 weeks. So you're moving towards that anchor that's being dropped. Okay. And that's a human thing, but it happens all the time. So especially when you're a facilitator in a room or you're leading a session or you're a leader in general, I mean, because people are looking up to you, if you're speaking first and if you're dropping an anchor in any sense, it could be about planning, it could be about an opinion or whatever, people will move to that anchor. Yeah. And you need to be very aware of that.
Yeah, because you'll sway their initial train of thought.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, and then you might not get the reality there.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's a very, and you so that's also why it's very interesting to see who starts talking in a meeting and then challenge that anchor. I mean, because there will be some information dropped, and you can challenge that. So, is there anyone who thinks differently? So, what I try to do always, that's also another heuristic. There always should be room for individual contribution, without being biased by someone else. So, very often at the beginning of meetings, just make sure that there's time for everyone to have that individual contribution, and then start talking.
Yeah. Exactly, because then if you do that during the conversation, you'll sway people's opinion, whilst if you do that in advance, people just have their own time and their own thoughts.
Yeah, they're not biased yet,
exactly.
In a way.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I can imagine that the meeting then takes a completely different turn of events than it would otherwise have.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, we're always talking about diversity and that we need that. And yes, we need that. But if we put people in a room, even if we're very diverse, and we start brainstorming because we really like brainstorming. Yeah. But I mean, then that happens because there will be people in the group who will be actively talking and speaking, and some people who might have really weird or different ideas won't speak up. So at the beginning, if you're doing a brainstorm, just let everyone write stuff down on their stickies, and then discuss everything, and then you will have a wide variety of ideas and perspectives, and then you can move towards some sort of a middle or whatever, or maybe a completely different way. But yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, that really makes sense, because I mean, it boils down to having people in the same room. I feel like we've been talking about that a lot, but that aside, it also comes back to their personality types. I can be very direct in some situations, and someone that's naturally more reserved might just be completely overshadowed by that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're always dealing with people, and also then in software, So I get that the communication and the social aspect is coming a bit more to the foreground now compared to previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but there's things that you can do to help, change that in a way. Let's say. So, for example, what I really like in the collaborative visual modeling sessions that I do, on purpose model stuff wrong.
Oh, okay.
And that's so much fun. Most of all, it's fun. Because, like, for example, in one of our workshops, we have a fake domain that we use, which is about a cinema, where you can go watch movies. And then we do example mapping with that. And because of we're biased, we have this cognitive bias that's called functional fixedness, which makes that we think about stuff in a certain way because we're used to that.
Yeah.
So we are trained to think about a cinema that it has chairs, it has rows, there is this, it's red, there is an entrance, it's dark. You have an image of a cinema, which we all have. And then we're asking them to solve the whole COVID problem. Like, okay, so now we have to have 1.5 meters in between seats, and there needs to be a row in between. How would you model that? And then we start doing example mapping. And then I tell them something about cognitive bias. And then I say, okay, and now we're going to model it wrong.
Okay.
So I want you to think of the craziest ideas that you can think of. So at one point in a workshop, we had something was like, yeah, we can have everyone, let everyone enter the cinema in these plastic bubbles, and then and then they can just sit wherever they want because then it doesn't matter anymore. Or we remove all the chairs from the cinema and then we make a little, whatever. There were these crazy ideas, and probably none of them will work.
Yeah.
But it will give you new ideas. It will let you counter that cognitive bias that's affecting you. And you can go from there. So that's the model it wrong part is so much fun to do. Yeah.
Sounds like it.
It is.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned makes me think way back to when I was a kid, actually. And I think I was in a classroom and a teacher asked, name everything you can do with this paperclip.
Yeah.
And you had to write down all the examples. And apparently children have way more of an imagination, and it kind of gets drilled down as you become an adult, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But it starts as a kid. You always have that naturally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone just needs to bring it out, I guess, in a session like that.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? I mean, because we're trained to look at things from a different from a certain perspective, because that's what we learned. And as a kid, you don't have that experience, and that bias is not really present there yet.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, sometimes when you say we're gonna model it wrong, people are like, yeah, but
why?
I mean, we're not going to do anything with that because it's not realistic, or we cannot do that. And I'm like, no, okay, just go. Just start modeling it wrong, and then everyone is having fun. And then you come up with a crazy idea, and then someone says, okay, so maybe this is crazy, but what if we... And then you continue on that idea, and there will be very, very creative, very realistic solutions coming from that. So that's... in the talk I mentioned, first solve the problem, then write the code.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, and I'm a really big believer of that, and that's exactly what's happening here. So before we start thinking about the coding and how are we going to fix that in our solution, and how is the architecture being built around that, first solve this problem, and then think about it and draw it, like model it in a way, and then write the code. So before you start thinking about writing the code, before you start thinking about your actual solution, just solve it first.
Yeah, that's really hard.
It's really hard because we are. It's way easier for us, usually for us in this IT world, to think about our precious technical problems because they're tangible, and we can do that in isolation if we want, and we can just work on it, and something happens.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there. But it's also way more expensive in a way, and not just cost wise, but also the energy and everything that you put in there as a human being. I mean, it's way easier to solve it before you have built anything yet.
Yeah.
Because if you created something, you came up with a solution for your problem, and it's not working, or someone has a better idea, and it's okay, just throw it away, go again.
Yeah, man, all that energy that you put into that.
Yeah, and talking about that, I mean, if you're already put in all that energy, the sunken cost fallacy is something that then happens because, I've spent already so much time, money, effort, and my whole life in it, and now you're telling me to throw it away? no, not going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what happens, right?
You just attach something on top of it and then it works.
Exactly, because then everything that I did wasn't for nothing.
Exactly.
But you make it way more complex. So, yeah.
It's really funny to hear that initially when you say let's model it wrong, people don't see the value in that. Because I think people are very solution oriented, and they're like, well, I know the answer to this question. So why are you asking me to give an incorrect answer? Because I know the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of makes, sometimes it makes people feel stupid in a way. Like, I have this indeed, like, I already know the answer. I have the world's best solution here. So why should I go in and think of this stupid stuff that we're never going to realize anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. But in the end, it people do see the added value of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, wasted energy. I mean, if you are already putting a lot of energy in something, that's way more wasted energy if you start building it and then decide to throw something away.
Exactly.
Then beforehand model stuff wrong, see what it brings you. Maybe it brings you nothing, but usually it does bring you a lot.
Yeah.
And then start writing that code.
Yeah, I really like the thought of challenging the right answer, because there's not necessarily a right answer. There's always multiple ones.
Yeah.
So if you think you know the right answer, there might be another one which is better.
Yeah.
So be
true.
open to just discuss it and figure it out.
Yeah, but and I completely agree with you there. But then in most companies that I've been in, you really need someone to drive that, because it's not common practice to model stuff wrong, right? And to challenge the best answer.
I don't think it's in our nature.
No, exactly. Yeah. No, it's not. So you really need to have someone who actively does that and says, okay, so now, yes, very nice solutions, great, but now let's take it from another side. And if you there really needs to be something called psychological safety in a team to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not feeling safe in a team, and then you're going to give wrong answers, it's not gonna work. And then it helps if someone external who has really nothing to do with the whole solution or the problem says, okay, let's model it wrong. And then if everyone thinks I'm stupid, I don't really care.
Exactly.
So that really helps. I would recommend it to everyone, actually. Just do it every once in a while. Have fun.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. How do you teach people to do that? Because it takes a lot of skills to be that facilitator in the room. Yeah,
it does. Practice, I think.
Yeah, try it out, right?
Yeah, try it out. I mean, at first I felt really stupid when I had these ideas and said, okay, so and give the right example, right? Lead by example in that sense. So at first, sometimes when people say, okay, model it wrong, what do you mean? And then you give examples and then try to go with the wildest ideas ever, because then that's your anchor that you're dropping consciously, because you are overdoing it. And then people will, move towards that over the top thing, which is already a good thing.
Exactly.
So it's lots of practice, actually, and I practiced with my teams mainly, because that's my trusted environment, and I feel like I can fail there, or I can experiment and make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that would be a recommendation. Just start within your own team, and after a while you'll get comfortable with it. You'll get comfortable with sharing these crazy ideas, and then you can do it external as well. If you want to, obviously, but for me as a facilitator, it takes practice.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and just trying to think outside of the box yourself as well, because I'm a human being as well, so I'm not used to that, and I'm not. It makes me uncomfortable as well, right? So it's practicing.
Yeah, it's funny that you say initially you feel stupid doing it. But you're probably doing the same thing now. You just don't feel stupid doing it anymore because you see the value. Yeah,
well, and still, sometimes I still feel stupid because I'm still a human being.
Exactly.
But sometimes in a group, every group has a different energy, right? So sometimes when you come into a group and you really feel like, ooh, these people are not really open for this yet.
Yeah.
So I'm really
have
curious.
That vibe.
Yeah, really curious how they're going to react, because like I said, I'm all about the learn fast, fail fast, experimenting. Just try to do stuff and see what it brings you. And if you have this crowd or this group that is like, then you really have to drag them. Like, okay, come on, we're gonna model it wrong. We're gonna
Exactly.
Yeah. So and then you still feel stupid because you feel everyone looking at you like, seriously, what's this woman thinking?
Yeah.
Like, why would we do that? And sometimes it doesn't work, right? I mean, and that's fine too. If it's not for you, then don't do it. I mean, again, you only have to do stuff. You should only do stuff that really fits your culture and your company vibe in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's still the case. You shouldn't do something that doesn't fit you. You shouldn't adopt the Spotify model
Exactly.
if it doesn't suit your company.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's the same for this.
Yeah, I love hearing that because lots of companies or lots of people think, well, I've read this blog post and it just hit home. This is what we should do.
Yeah, exactly.
But they don't look at what they have and try and kind of model towards that.
Yeah.
They just take something and try and retrofit their own stuff into it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're only adopting parts of it because you think they will work. And that's all what this whole socio-technical system thinking is about. I mean, don't just focus on the technical, social, or cognitive aspect, but they are impacting each other. You have to balance them out. You cannot just focus on one or two because everything is impacting each other. If you're taking a very technical decision, then it will impact your culture. It will impact how people work together. If you decide, hey, we need open offices, it will affect everything that you do on all three levels. So yeah, don't just copy paste stuff because you think because you think it worked for someone else doesn't mean that it will work for you.
Yeah.
And that's why I like this socio-technical system thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I really subscribe to the thought that you can just experiment. If you feel like something might be for you and your company and your culture, just try it out, reflect, see if it works. And if not, just try something else or go back to the way you were.
Yeah, but that's not happening all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because then again, we've spent already so much money, time, and effort in it. So now we're going to full on in this thing. Why? Yeah. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think people lose the sight of the goals as well. They're like, why are we doing this? And no one can explain to me why we're doing this. What's the goal?
Yeah, exactly.
Once they figure out the goal, then they're like, this is actually pretty good, but we're not really reaching the goal because we didn't even know it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to adjust just a little bit.
Yeah, and well, for example, with these open offices, then it's supposed to improve communication because we're all in the same room. And then what you saw happening at some companies is that everyone bought a headphone and was like, I'm going to isolate myself because I don't want to talk to people. I'm working. I don't want to hear everyone.
Can't focus.
No, exactly. So then I'm like, it's not going to bring you what you envisioned that it would bring you.
Yeah.
So be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a lot of time and energy to get it right.
Yeah.
And I don't think people will ever get it exactly right. They'll probably reach like 90% of it or 80%. It's just abstract percentages at this point.
Yeah.
But they might skew away from that percentage and they might go back into their old habit, let's just say. Yeah. How do you keep companies from staying on the right path and not deviating into a side path that leads back to the initial point that they came from, basically?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with behavioral science, which I also studied, obviously. And I'm applying that in companies as well, because I think everything comes down to how we behave as human beings. So you have lots of change companies, change management companies, change agencies, whatever. But you really have to focus on behavior. So that's why I think it starts with management teams or leadership teams defining what it is that they want, and really in terms of results. So what is it that it needs to bring us? What do we want?
What's the goal?
Yeah, what's the goal? And then very often they come with stuff like better communication, more transparency. And that's not behavior, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it goes wrong, because lots of people and organizations and change management companies say that they can achieve that. And sure, maybe they can. But for me, what I always try to do is, okay, so what do we actually mean with that transparency or better communication? How are we going to define that in terms of behavior? And for me, behavior is something that I can observe and that I can count. That's a good heuristic. I want to count stuff.
You measure it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I really want to be able to measure it and see patterns. And you have to link that to the results that you want to get. So you really have to start with the results. This is what I want to achieve. how can we make sure that we adjust that behavior and then really be concrete in that sense? And I think that that's where it starts, and that's how you can keep certain changes and ideas and visions alive. But that starts with management teams, leaders who are really aware of how they can change behavior within teams. Yeah,
I think it's very naturally, because I hear we're doing this for a better experience or for better communication, but I'm like, how are we going to measure better communication? Like,
exactly.
Is someone going to say at the end, well, we achieved better communication?
Yeah.
Now let's move on to the next problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's not how it works, right? I mean, imagine you're just working in that company and your leadership team comes with a very fancy vision and says, we are trying to reach better communication. And then people are thinking, okay, so what do you expect from me then?
Exactly.
What does it mean to communicate better? And that's where where I help leadership teams as well. Like, okay, so how are we defining this? How are we defining this goal? What's the result that it needs to bring? And then start thinking about the behavior. And that's something that you sometimes see happening, that people are really focusing on the behavior, but you should start with the results. What is it that you really want to achieve? And how can you make sure that the right consequences are related to those results? And then you can start thinking about behavior.
Yeah, that makes way more sense. And I'm a big fan of also setting the expectation then, because we're doing this for a certain goal.
Yeah.
So this is what we expect, basically, and people can challenge that. If you put it out in the open, people are naturally going to challenge that. People that are a bit more direct, I guess. But it is out there and people can challenge it. I think that's the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But how often do you model stuff wrong, by the way? I forgot to ask. But
no, I think I am going to do it, because we are in kind of a phase where we're trying to figure out our domains. And I think I'm going to challenge that and say, let's model it completely in like a Wild West and see where we end up. To see what kind of other solutions are out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're also, I mean, I've been on a project for might be a year now, but we're set in our ways, I've noticed. And I'd like to challenge that. It's just kind of hard to figure things out and try and do it, because you need to step outside of your daily cycle and just experiment and try. But I'm very open to that, and I think it's very cool for people to try that and just not be afraid to fail in that way as well.
But then sure, that's a very important one. Just there needs to be room for failure, right? And there should be room to laugh about certain ideas and solutions, but not in a bad way. I mean, when that person came up with, everyone should be in those really big plastic bubbles, everyone laughed. I mean, it's because you're seeing that and you're
that's
thinking,
a good one.
This would, but it's just a funny, it's a funny idea. But no one was really laughing at that person, like in a bad way, let's say. So that's laugh, but don't laugh at someone.
Exactly. It's not personal.
Exactly.
To me, it never is. I never take something personally. It's about something I said, or it's about my opinion. Sure, we can discuss that. But it's never me as a person. And because of that train of thought, I think I am a bit more direct. Because if I think other people also think the same way, I can just say, well, the design was shit, so let's talk about it. And they can say, well, your code was shit, so let's try and fix it. But it's not me. I mean, I'm the one that wrote it, but it's not a personal attack. If it looks like shit, I'll agree with it. And we can fix that way.
But not everyone thinks like that.
And that's the hard part. Because I don't know why everyone doesn't think that way. Why sometimes when I say something, people are like, do you not like me as a person? I'm like, no, that's completely not it.
No,
why would I not like you?
Yeah, well, that's I'm telling this quite often, but we are herd animals, right? I mean, we're just a big group of sheep that really needs to belong to something or a group or someone. So we can say that we like doing stuff in isolation and that we don't care what other people think. But that's not true. So when you're dealing with others and when someone is going to challenge what you did or going to judge what you did, there's this chance of being rejected in a way. And we don't like that as human beings. So there's always this feeling of, is this person going to reject me? And do I still belong to that group then or not? And that's what's going on there. And then we try to take things personal because we really value how other people see us. And it has nothing it's completely irrational. But that's that's how it works.
I guess so. That's why I really like your point of view of just being objective and being like, this is what I see. This isn't necessarily an attack. this is just, did anyone else see that?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but that's indeed a very important way of communicating that message, right? I mean, you can say to someone, well, this piece of code looks like shit. I mean, I don't know who wrote it, but it's horrible.
Yeah.
You can also state some factual things like what I see happening in this piece of code is blah, blah, blah. Or the patterns that I see here are X, Y, Z. Anyone recognizing that? That's a completely different, different way of communicating. And it leaves room for a conversation.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think taking away from this, I will be a bit more aware of the way I communicate.
Yeah.
I'm already starting to change it. I love asking questions.
Yeah, well, that's a good start.
Yeah, for sure. But that's also why I hate, for example, texting. Because there's nothing like, I don't have any intonation. You just see the text. I can add a smiley face, but that can be interpreted wrong.
Exactly.
So I'm a guy that calls a lot more than he texts. Just to get my point across a bit more naturally with my cadence and the way I say it and my little laugh behind it. Yeah. It's very different than just a ha ha ha.
It's completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. But it's super important to have that kind of shared communication within teams then. Yeah. Because otherwise you won't have that safe space.
Yeah, well, linguistics and meaning is something that's definitely important. I mean, especially within domain-driven design. There's a focus on language, right? You have to, in every bounded context, there has to be the same language. We have to make sure that we're on the same page about what word X means. We really need to be aligned on that, because sometimes in for example, product can mean a completely different thing in different contexts. Yeah. And you have to make agreements about that. So when we're, for example, doing visual collaborative modeling with event storming, that's where you find your bounded context and create those boundaries. People are saying stuff and they are saying words, and then we're always trying to challenge that. So what do you mean with product? Yeah. What do you mean with customer? And then the first reaction is always, yeah, everyone knows what we mean with product and customer. What's this stupid question that you're asking? And then we figure out that in different contexts, it means a different thing. So that's even on the level of words, it's crucial that you are having the same meaning for different words. Yeah,
it makes sense, because based on your user group or your domain, a product can mean a different thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, it can exist, but then you need to be very explicit about what one word means in one context and what it means in another context. And everyone has to be aware of that, because otherwise, it will get messy in when you start writing the code, let's say.
Yeah. Just on the grand scheme of things, I now have quite an idea on how to kind of change existing culture and some of the tools that you gave out on how to do that and how to experiment as well. But I'm still struggling on how to keep on the right path. It just seems like a lot of people, or a lot of times I see a lot of people put a lot of energy into actually making a change or making a change happen and shifting things. But things naturally just fall down on the same spot that they came from. Yeah, I'm a big fan of just reflecting and seeing if you're still on the right path. Yeah, exactly. But naturally, people don't want to take the time for that.
No, and I think that's why it's important that you, as a consultant or as basically as anyone, even if you're just in a team, sometimes the tendency that we have is once the change happened, as you said. Yeah. Okay, we're done. Project done. This can move to the done lane, and well, we'll just go on to the next thing. Yeah. And then it's important that there's someone who is going to be that annoying person who's constantly challenging. Sorry.
No worries.
Challenging what's happening and continue to share these observations that you're seeing. Like you said, if you see people falling back in their old habits and you see that happening 3 times, I will be the person who says, well, this is what I've seen in the last week. What do we think? Yeah. So you really need someone who keeps challenging that. And I mean, with behavior, changing behavior, I think you're never done, especially as a leader. Once you make the change, you still have to reinforce the behavior that the desired behavior, the behavior that you want to see in people. But I do think that it comes down to someone who's really conscious and kind of compulsive in a way about trying to observe things that are happening continuously. So keep doing that. Be really strict on that. And it's really just about the observations and the signals that you're getting, and then giving that back to the group and have that conversation about it. I'm doing a lot of sense making in workshops and meetings, which is basically just asking questions on a scale from 1 to 10. How do you feel about blah, blah, blah? And it's really not about the technical stuff, but really about the, for example, the trust that's there, or the psychological safety, or how are we doing on experimenting? How do you feel about that? And then just let people place dots on lines. That gives you an idea of how the group is feeling, how the group is doing, and then relate that to the observations that you have, and then go have that conversation with people again.
Yeah. And also the person that observes and does this, can that be anyone? I'm assuming so, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think it can be anyone. I think it helps in the beginning if it's someone external sometimes, because that person will not care about looking stupid and all that sort of stuff, and is able to call stuff out. I mean, sometimes it's hard to call stuff out if you're part of a
skin
team.
In the game. Yeah,
exactly. But after a while, I mean, when everyone is on board and everyone wants to make it a success, then I think it can be anyone. Yeah, but just be clear about who that person is, right? I mean, then and don't be surprised then if that person all of a sudden in a meeting stands up and says, "Well, I'm seeing this happening 3 times. We should have a conversation about that."
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think it can be anyone. I mean, that it should be anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said, that also you need to be vocal about that, and again, manage the expectation that this person might just say anything, or it could be a group even, as long as it's kind of a shared understanding of, okay, this is what we're going to do now. This might happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be aware of it. And it's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely not.
Exactly.
No. And but as soon as a group is more used to it, that stuff is happening, and that someone just randomly shares patterns and observations, if you're used to that as a group, then it's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, awesome. I had a blast talking to you.
Great,
Lots
me too.
of social stuff.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, we didn't write one single line of code in this session.
Yeah, exactly. Love that. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
From your sponsors, Zebia, creating digital leaders.